I was surprised a couple of weeks ago with how many of you were taking an interest when I mentioned offhand the set of my core values at work. And this is part of the foundational structure in play here that I put together 11, 12, and 13 years ago on behalf of the Shala. And I haven't talked about it much, at least not lately, so I thought I would add to what I've shared so far since there's an interest. To repeat, the core values that I bring to work are development of expertise, depth of understanding, relationships, and longevity. Longevity of all of the above. And really all of those four are kind of always talking to each other in a way that gives rise to the sort of personality of the work. So if there's a great interest in students' direct experience, or a value of epistemic humility, or a minimalist aesthetic that's not marked by a particular era, or constant return to a sense of humor, all of those like more personality things in the expression at work are coming out of the bedrock of just remembering those key values. It's important, like in the birth of an entity that's an organization, to set intentions, right? This is part of yoga. It's something I resisted a lot, especially in the first decade of my practice, for reasons that might become clear now. But there was an inflection point when I did write some things down, and that's here with us now. In that time, I also set what at the time felt like very abstract mission statement for the Shala that has had real concrete implications for how everything has happened since then. So the mission of this place is simply to provide a space for serious practice in Ann Arbor and to support a few dedicated teachers around the world. And it's always been that. And it seems simple, but that has actually been the thing that has guided me to the following. And this is coming up really a lot recently, and so I'm going to say more. If somebody's going to be a serious practitioner, and all of that with the sense of humor and the epistemic humility and all of that, but if this is like their path and they're actually going to develop it, the thing that they need and that I have become devoted to protecting is a good decade of just openness to their own experience. We don't even learn to read the book of ourselves until we know how to read, like basic sensory training in how to be with the gaze and how to be with the sound of the breath and how to apply the understanding of Bandha. So once you learn to read the book of yourself with Trishthana, then you just need time, like a decade every day of not trying to layer a bunch of conceptual stuff on that, not trying to step into the knowingness of this is what these postures are, this is what this practice is. You just need silence and non-conceptual space to have what I'm calling a serious practice, but a practice with the depth of understanding that animates all of this. And beyond that, if teaching is going to happen, and now a bunch of people have crossed that threshold of 10 years of being with themselves, with Trishthana, it is out of that any hope of learning to listen to another, any hope of really teaching with depth, I think that is even possible. So this will tell you, where this is coming from, and possibly my own limitations of view. But this is really coming out of my personal biography, and the ways in which a commitment to reading the book of myself was something I had to clarify and fight for. The phase of not knowing what it was really long and deep and so sweet, such that when I kind of unkinked the hose, that I had the limitation I had put on myself of not teaching for a long time, then there was a lot to offer. But the most important thing in my personal biography has been the 10 years that I spent not trying to talk about what the practice was, not trying to know anything, in fact, trying not to know, and being really, really, really discerning and careful about the information that was coming at me and how I filtered it and what I actually wanted to take into myself. We're a composite of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. We're also the product of the teaching that we take seriously. And it was amazing to be in Los Angeles in the early 2000s when the yoga industry was really in its hockey stick growth moment. And I had this amazing experience of being invited to participate in the Yoga Works teacher training. This was in 2006, so I'd been practicing for 6 years and been really, it took me a couple years to kind of find it, to find the Trishtana and realize that the non-conceptuality and the silence were what were starting to teach me on their own, right? But I had found the path by 2006. And so I was invited and given a scholarship to be in the flagship teacher training, the teacher training that gave birth to the genre. So this was the one that was originally written by Mati Ezrati and Lisa Walford. These are really, really famous teachers in the sort of yoga world, the Southern California and global yoga world of the 2000s. And so I took that teacher training with the manual that they wrote, taught by Lisa Walford and another very, very prominent sort of hatha yoga teacher who's still out there, Annie Carpenter. And all respect to all 3 of these. The 3 of them created a paradigm that's not Ashtanga yoga. It's not at all this more mystical path of Trishtana and self-inquiry that we are doing. I mean, that what they're doing is a shared group fitness paradigm that draws on some of the physicality of Ashtanga yoga, right? And they put that paradigm together extremely well. But already in 2006, when I was given a scholarship and asked to participate, what I didn't realize is I was asked to participate so that I could do a lot of demos in that setting. And I would find that of the 60 people in the TT, 1, and that was me, had a daily practice. So the whole situation was pretty horrifying, just in the idea of these are the people that are paying to learn to teach, and they don't have a daily practice. And they want me, who doesn't know anything at all, to be the demonstrator for this learning situation, right? So I went through that teacher training and got this best version of that paradigm, and it was actually really enjoyable, and there are beautiful friendships that happen there, and I was able to show up with a sincerity as a student, and at the same time I really, really had to firewall that from my personal practice, because they were telling me to understand the postures anatomically, and and to really take a knowing attitude of, this is how Parshva works. These are the universal set of muscle actions. This is the effect of it. Just a very boilerplate kind of understanding of what the purpose and what the effect and the interpretation of every single posture should be. And that makes great sense for group fitness, where we're not talking about a mystical internal self-study practice that's every day, presumably for years and years and years in perpetuity, right? And so during that whole training, I felt like I got this amazing tour of like all the expressions of sort of commercial yoga. And the more that I learned, the more I had to like build up the firewall, because migrating any of that of like, oh, this physical thing is what's happening in this posture into my own personal practice was gonna significantly diminish any understanding that was coming out of the silence. And so this is something that it breaks my heart when I see anyone try to engage with the Ashtanga as if that paradigm is knowledge. Like, that's a knowledge for a different setting, and for us it's bad knowledge, it's wrong knowledge. Like, it's 1/5 of what we're here to do, insofar as like the understanding is physical, right? Like, what we're doing is working with the nervous system and with the mind and with the deep mind, and the practice itself is here to train our senses. So this is a completely different understanding of what we're even doing on the square of PVC with the asanas than the group fitness paradigm. And really, like, my commitment here in the Shala to protect you from having to go into that incredibly just simplified and superficialized interpretation of what asana is there so that you're never being forced into that mind space of like the knowing mind, which is it's a mind space of deep ignorance. If you go there too early, you limit yourself in your understanding of what this even is in a way that leads to arrested development. I've seen it over and over again. And a lot of the articulation of the mission here of the Shala for serious practice and supporting a few teachers is a commitment to making sure everybody is safe and not like sort of poached for the yoga teacher labor market for that good 10 years of just silence. So when I was receiving amazing sort of business coaching and figuring out the mission of what we're doing here, one thing that Ari Weinswag, the founder of Zingerman's, who was the first person I ever received executive coaching from, said was that understand in your understanding of yourself and your employees in his point of view, where people are on that hierarchy of knowledge. So, we're in an era when like hierarchy means something like bad. I think this will go away as we understand that like, knowledge is scaffolded. This is the new safe way to talk about the hierarchy of learning, is the idea of scaffolding, right? Like, you need to know algebra before calculus, and you need to understand breathing before backbending, right? So that like this is just how knowledge accumulates, and Ashtanga is very much cumulative, right? And so the lead class is an expression of like, oh, there's cumulative knowledge. Like, it's okay to be in a setting where there are very, very experienced, knowledgeable practitioners around us who have just like figured out a little bit more on that scaffolding than we have. In fact, that's optimal. Like, it sucks to be the one who's like holding the expertise. We want as much as possible to be like around people who have more expertise, right? So Ari, the way he expressed this idea of the scaffolding, the development over time of expertise, is that there are 4 phases of the learning process. There's unconscious incompetence. I am surely unconsciously incompetent in huge areas of life, right? Many numerous areas of life. Don't even know that I don't know, right? So this is a lot of what's happening in like the yoga teacher training world. Like somebody thinks they know, or this is rather don't know that they don't know, right? Then where that gets you, if you keep going, is to conscious incompetence. And this is the Patanjali insight, is that the recognition that we are confused is an insight, huge insight, because it actually takes you out of unconscious incompetence. Even just having a mind, most of the time, really easy to not know that we're confused and just be in that state without realizing it, right? So the next phase is to know that you don't know. And then there's this kind of dangerous phase that, in my idea, comes about 10 years on the road of whatever this mystical being with yourself is, after you've studied the book of yourself with the reading knowledge of Tristana, right? And that's conscious competence. Like, oh, I sort of get what this is. Maybe now I can say what it is. And then the place that I really want you to get to hang out is the next phase beyond that, which is unconscious competence, where you don't have to articulate what any of this is, where you don't have to hang out in the conceptual, where nobody's looking at you to be the one who knows, and you can just enjoy. This is, flow. This is the skier or snowboarder who's a savant and cannot teach others because it's a completely embodied understanding of what their method is, right? Unconscious competence is the sweet spot. And when he shared that paradigm with me at the beginning of my sort of teaching life, it was so sad, because I realized that according to that conceptual structure that he offered, I was in a moment of having to go back down that ladder from unconscious competence, which is just open and free and nobody wants anything from you, back down to conscious competence, where like there needed to be some ability to language, some ability to share what this method even was. And so this is a big part of what I'm protecting too. Not only the ability to move into conscious incompetence, and just like that is its own sweet spot. It's amazing. This is where the epistemic humility is really developed. It takes years, right? But also I want to protect you to have a good long block of time in unconscious competence, because this is like, I see many of you get years and years into your practice and there's this joy that sparks on like 7, 8, 9 years in, and it's just like, oh, there's a love of the non-conceptualized experience of being in your practice that is the hallmark of unconscious competence. And so for a lot of you, the path is always going to be that, and it's so sweet and it's so good. And for a small number of you who've gotten really deep into that territory, it does seem like the call of service is one when I say to you, like, you could teach, you're like, oh yeah, like actually this is correct for me. And I don't envy any of you who recognize from that place of unconscious competence that there's truly a call to share. All of you are doing service, every single one of you here. That's a commonality of everybody who finds this place, right? Not everybody needs to do service around your wonderful yoga practice. But if that's the case, and that's your path, I just want to make sure that you have had a good block of 10 years to revel in the mystery and to understand the truth, the beauty, all of it that comes from not ever having to be the one who knows. And on the other side of that, usually what you get is expressions of the practice that are deeply epistemically humble. So not going to be reduced to, anatomical or physical understandings, although that is important. Again, that's 1/5 of what we do. And so from this perspective, the yoga teacher training paradigm, that's why I say it's wrong knowledge. Like, it's wonderful for what it is, but in the context of a practice with such depth, for someone to try to build a teaching practice out of a paradigm that is itself really, really a gross misinterpretation of what we do, you're never going to be able to scaffold onto wrong knowledge a teaching practice that you can do for the long term without getting bored, because you'll just be teaching physical yoga, right? So I just want to make sure that those of you on this path, you're never exploited, you're never put in that position of arrested development by being pushed into service prematurely. For some of us, service is an expression of the practice that scaffolds our knowledge to another level. For a lot of us, we're smart enough to stay out of it and stay on the path of the non-conceptual, deep personal understanding. Both of those are their own really wonderful expressions of the path. But in the meantime, the way that accidentally started expressing itself to the shallow, because at the beginning I just said this is going to be a place for serious practice and to support as a few teachers, is that for the first 10 years I had to be really careful about how we thought about what knowledge even was, and really careful about staying in the don't know mind and in the place of openness. And so the thing that's been coming up for me recently that I mentioned is that when I see those of you who have been through that same paradigm that I have been, and it's a bunch of us, right, trying to use that paradigm to understand the practice, that is where my heart breaks. Because those are two very different paths, but two, there's just so much that will be lost if you try to build on a foundation that's 1/5 of the house, right? Then you're only going to be sort of building over here without the full understanding of what this practice can be when you train in your senses and really, really feeling yourself inside. So that's a lot. It was 10, 11, 12, 13 years ago that all this stuff got laid down. And wow, be careful what you put in language, and definitely what you write in your little LLC building notebook, because that has definitely determined every single decision that I have made ever since.